Hello and welcome to the Leaders in Supply Chain podcast. I am your host, Radu Palamariu, Managing Director of Elcott Global. Our mission is to connect the supply chain ecosystem in Asia and globally, and we want to bring forward the most interesting leaders in the industry. Today I'm very happy to have with us Fabrice Thomas, who is the Vice President of Global Supply Chain for Agilent Technologies. Fabrice has been working for nearly 20 years in supply chain, from railways at Alstom to industrial robots at ABB, across Europe, America and Asia. At Agilent, Fabrice is in charge of global supply chain, which is comprising of a team of 1,000 plus people with sites located in the US, Denmark, Germany, China, Malaysia and Singapore. Agilent, for our listeners, is an American public research, development and manufacturing company who was established in 1999 as a spin-off from Hewlett-Packard. It provides analytical instruments, software services and consumables for the entire laboratory workflow, and it focuses mostly on 6 core markets, which are food, environmental and forensics, pharmaceutical, diagnostics, chemical and energy, as well as research. Well, Fabrice, pleasure to have you with us and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Radu.
And let's start a little bit by asking you to tell us about your journey from transitioning Alstom, railways, trains, type of a company. Then you went to ABB on the industrial robots unit, and now you're with Agilent. Tell us a little bit shortly about your story, your career, and how you transitioned these 3 big companies.
Start with that. I think you need to go back when I started my career in supply chain a little bit like 20 years ago, something like this. And I start with different position as supplier quality, supplier development, having different function at Alstom when I was already working from France, but managing different sites, developing the principle of supplier quality, supplier development. Then, still being in France, I moved step by step to the industrial sourcing structure, where at that time we were working on the transfer of activity from high-cost country to India and to China. This is where I start to learn about Asian country, Asian culture, and way of doing business in Asia. And in 2011, I've been proposed to move as a director for supply chain of Alstom Transport for Asia Pacific. And this is really where I start my career in Asia, working definitively outside of France. But it was already 10 years that I was working at Alstom. And after 1 year, I decided to engage myself in the MBA for the 2 years. But I felt it was the necessary acquisition of knowledge to make a transition to the next step. And at that time, I was like 40 years old, something like this. So really not yet the mid-crisis, but at least professionally, most probably. But I thought it was the necessary learning that I have to add in order to prepare the next step of my career. And exactly almost at the same time that I was finishing the MBA, I was already anticipating, looking for another job. I had the opportunity at ABB Robotics to become the head of supply chain worldwide, but still based in China, where they had the biggest factory. And interesting speaking, I remember when I had my interview with the one that would have been my boss later on. He was the head of this factory and all the operation in the world. He told me that at the management team, at the board of this ABB Robotic supply unit that is called, he said we only have engineer. And what we need is someone with more business acumen. So in order to have a certain weight, if we say, among the other manager, I need to have someone who has the experience in supply chain, but also who has an MBA. So accumulation of both finally was the right one. And this is how I started my journey, 4 years in total at ABB Robotics. It was quite interesting because it was a very industrial company, ABB, the world, okay, a big MNC, already know what is the plus and minus working at Alstom previously, so the complexity of it, the relation with the corporate, and this kind of stuff. But working in a specific environment from China and bigger factory in China, that gave us a certain freedom to experience some transformation within supply chain, and it is quite well supported by the management. The biggest achievement we had at the time at ABB was to move from a typical supply chain with procurement or purchasing at that time and logistic and supplier quality, and transform after 2 years I was there into a value chain organization. that is really, I think, specific to that market that we have been able to make that transition. At that period, 2016, the robotic market, and notably in China, was booming, and there was not enough supplier of robot, but also supplier of component to manufacture the robot in order to serve the market. And the customer, usually what I was proposing is kind of RFQ, saying, okay, we know the price of the product, we fix the price of the product that we're going to buy. We know the performance of the product. So we have selected 3-4 potential suppliers. The one who's going to have the market are the one who will be able to serve the quantity that we want. And there was a significant bottleneck, both for the robot manufacturer, but also for the component. And this is where supply chain became, I would say, a competitive advantage for the company toward the customer. Because the supply chain, as long as it was able to purchase enough components from its own suppliers, bring it to the factory, then the second step was for sure the factory to set the robot, was able to commit toward the final customer, yes, that they will have a certain number of robots in a certain time frame. And that was making the big difference. And this is where we decided to transform the supply chain into an interesting value chain and making it a competitive advantage where the company can increase all the revenue, all the gross margin, all these kind of things. Total, I was 7 years in China from 2018. And I think that was the end of my cycle in China. And everybody know about the fluctuation that we can have in China at that time. And get a contact from a headhunter in Singapore, call me and say, okay, we have a quite good experience to propose you. You never work for an American company, always French and Swedish company. In your career plan, that would be good to join an American company. It was quite interesting because my initial graduation university is in biotechnology. So I knew Agilent from that time a little bit. So I'm not unfamiliar with the product. And the job that they were proposing me, this is the one that I have today as a global supply chain vice president, was based on what I know, what I knew, what the competency I acquired over the past 20 years. But the big challenge that they were proposing me to handle a big transformation, a digital transformation, and a real one. And I remember when I was interviewed by the one who is my boss, actually, the CEO of the company, Henrik, and said that, you know, if I look at our organization in supply chain toward our competitor, I think we are among the best. But if I look at our supply chain and compare with the rest of the world or the rest of the industry, we still have a big gap. So it was a challenge also for them because usually they only promote internally the different candidates. And that I am the first one that they brought from outside to become a vice president. And even more challenging, I was the first French guy taking that kind of position in a very American company in terms of culture, based in Singapore with a strong Singaporean, I would say, mindset behind that. So in a nutshell, this is about 20 years of experience and how finally I'm landing in Singapore, ending this position of supply chain, global supply chain vice president at Agilent.
Fascinating, and I mean that's life, you know. Sometimes it takes you to very interesting parts of the planet as well as parts of the corporate cultures and corporate organizations. Furthermore, wanted to go a little bit deeper into what Agilent does in particular, because it's quite specific products. It's at the end of the day, probably most of us as mere mortals, let's call ourselves mere mortals, we would not necessarily engage with the type of equipment, because you sell for laboratories, for hospitals, for forensics, for research. So it's highly skilled and highly sophisticated types of equipment. What are some of the biggest challenges from a supply chain perspective, from a parts perspective, from a putting it together and delivering it perspective, when it comes to this type of products?
First, it's related to the footprint of Agilent. Agilent has roughly 10, 12 factories in the world. Agilent grow externally every year, so we acquire and we integrate different companies. So roughly today we should have like 12 important footprint. With each factory has a specialty, has a product in hand, which make quite complex in terms of supply chain, because there is a high level of concentration on one product of all the technology which are related to the supplier and the final product. So which make a little bit difficult the usual lever that we use in supply chain on the volume, which does not exist. This is really a high mix, low volume. Highly depending on the suppliers, because the technology inside the product has an IP from Agilent, but the components are depending or related to one supplier usually. So there is this dependency, which is quite high. We have a lot of factory also in US, and with the complexity of the trade war in between China and US, that bring a little bit of challenge also there. These are products which are, technically speaking, extremely complex, where the level of quality which is expected by the from the supplier is also very high. There are products that stand for many years at the customer. So the spare part has to be available for 10, 15, sometimes 20 years. There is not a high speed of replacement of those products. So if you take something like automotive principle on supply chain, you take completely the opposite, and then you have our business model toward our suppliers. So that's really the thing. Then it was the strategy in terms of supply chain was some years ago really to leverage on the cost perspective to move everything to Asia and to China, where already we have factory in Shanghai, in Penang, and Singapore. And then you realize that for the past 2 years, and between the fluctuation of the RMB, of the currency there, but also, as I was saying, because of the tariff, then we have to completely redispatch our footprint. So I would say that Agilent was following a little bit the trend for the past 10 years and realized that now there is a little bit of backward step or partial that have to be handled. This is a little bit the challenge that we are facing now at Agilent supply chain.
And in terms of, so you mentioned a few of these challenges, and obviously the trade war has added to the complexity and has made things a lot more complicated for most supply chain professionals. And if anything, at the end of this, for sure, I guess the one conclusion is that global supply chains will finally be very, very agile because there's no other solution out of this. Well, you can call it a mess, or you can call it a blessing in disguise. I don't know what you want to call it, but tell us a little bit in terms of, there's a lot of talk also about digital supply chain, and everybody has a roadmap, and I know that you have a roadmap at Agilent. What are some of the key initiatives that you're trying to drive? Maybe let's start there. What are some of the key initiatives that you're trying to drive, and then we go a little bit more into the details.
I would start with by the structure which is offered. When I joined Agilent, CEO of the boss of all the operation has decided to engage the company in this digital transformation. But usually you say that internally this transformation or the plan is a little bit empiric, in the same that there is a lot of improvisation, or in the base case this is driven by IT, or we try new technology not exactly knowing where we're going to go, and this kind of stuff. What is the big difference, I would say, and I was positively surprised, is the structure behind this digital transformation. So there is 6 pillars to support this in our organization. But the most interesting, I would say, this is the principle of having startup within our own organization. So we have 3 think tank that we call it, based on Megatrain technology, and all are supported by incubator. So if I take on the one on the automation, for example, which is one of the big train, then within this structure, because this is not an organization, this is made of the people that have a job every day, but that just want to be engaged in this transformation, you have incubator on the automatic guided vehicles, on the robot, typically. And the aim of those incubators is to try new technology, to learn about new technology, to learn about the application of those new technology in our environment, and at a point of time to decide how it can be scaled up and becoming one of the solutions in our process, warehouse, or manufacturing center. If I take simply the example of the automatic guided vehicle, somehow we heard about this for years, but Agilent never used it. And for the past 6 months, we have explored with different suppliers what are the HGV, how they are working, the ones that are connected to the ERP, the ones that are autonomous, and these kind of things, where we could use it, in which kind of application. And recently, we have decided to acquire 6 of them from different brands to put them in Shanghai, in Germany, several in US, one in Singapore. And the idea is, in the next 3 months, to operate them in different routes, different application, then to write a proof of concept. Therefore, then to be able to decide, okay, where we could use those AGV in our structure, in our concept, what for, and what could be the benefit of it. So this is a journey which is organized by the management of the operation, but where all the people, they have their part of the game to play. To support that, because you cannot ask an organization, if I don't make a mistake, we should be like 4,500, something like this, in operation, covering all manufacturing and supply chain. 1 year ago, something like this, all the people, they had the opportunity to learn online what we call the School of Digital Innovation. And there was 3 levels on this School of Digital Innovation. Each level was about 8 to 9 hours of course online to learn about artificial intelligence, about automation, what is digital transformation, and so on, and so on, and so on. And on the number that I have, I think today there is more than 65-70% of the total organization that have followed this learning journey.
Mm-hmm.
So which means when you speak to anybody in the company or in our organization about what is digital transformation, what are the megatrends, what are the AGV, what are the robots, what is artificial intelligence. Nobody's an expert for sure, but at least they have a flavor.
Language.
Yeah, there is a common language. There is a flavor behind this. So it's easy, and this is one of the things we need to discuss after, is how you engage the people. It's by explaining them, by giving them a little bit of flavor of that transformation, and instead for them to be passive and receiving this digital transformation, to understand and feel that they are the actor of their future, and they are building their future, and they don't have to wait and big things happening that they could be replaced by robot and all this nightmare thinking, but that they handle their future and they make the change for the company for sure, but also for themselves.
So how do you do that? I mean, there's the probably the $1 million question, because usually when all these initiatives, and what I'm seeing over and over again, the common themes of all the conferences that happen on supply chain is that it's that how do you manage and take and lead and almost, I don't know, people on the journey, right? How do you get them on the journey?
There is a structure behind this. There is process, methodology, and there is a commitment of certain number of managers. And this is part for the other vice president and senior director. This is one of our objectives, to make that transformation happening. So this is really a global objective led by our CEO. We started by, I was explaining, by training and explaining to people what is really digital transformation. And for the one who are interested, we offer them the possibility to get engaged in those incubators and to test some new technology. Another phase of this is we have what we call digital champion in the site. So there are people who can look after any possible technology at the site level, experiment any kind of technology, get in contact with any kind of university or consultant or whatsoever, exploring, if I may say. And from the moment they think that has a certain value, then to bring it in the incubator, where we have a structure to test the product, and afterwards to move to the scalability. So this is not imposed. This is a proactive journey that we offer to the team. So this part is purely on the digital transformation, but digital side of the transformation. But when we speak about digital transformation, this is not only about technology. This is first not about technology, it's about business. So our organization is structured in 4 main branches, if I may say. There is 3 manufacturing areas, 3 manufacturing divisions, to make it simple, and the global supply chain, which is transversal. The 4 VP that we all have a transformation plan. In the case of global supply chain, the top 5 projects are the one we have set up from last year, and that's going to last for the next 3 years, most probably. They are the most complex, and I will come back on that, project to handle that transformation. Behind this, we have about 20 smaller projects or mid-size projects, less complex, but always with a business impact. And then behind this, we have about 50 other smaller projects, still focusing on supply chain, which are impacting one site or one technology. If I look at the 5 big projects that we have automation of the warehouse. I think all the company that has logistics, they are looking at this, that for sure. Second one is on the supplier relationship management. Definitively, I think all companies also look at this. There is nothing new. But always this is in the concept of the context of Agilent. There is one which looks a little bit weird, but the quality management system, we call it. Because the thing is that we are a very decentralized company. And ensuring that this digital transformation is handled at the same speed and the same intensity across the different logistics center, across the different factory that we have is essential in terms of success, in order not to face with an unbalanced situation where you have one region which is ahead of the others and creating those silos and so on. What we really want is to keep one global supply chain across the world. Then some specific activity or project related to China, because this is still one big project or focus on the company. And one that we call about the supplier transaction collaboration, which is the dematerialization of the PO and PR. So among those 5 projects, nothing very different, I think, than other companies, but put in the context of Agilent, that's a big leapfrog that we want to operate. And behind this, those 20 projects, always around the transformation, you can see we have project about people development and leadership with some specific way of thinking about this, which is about the career development, the succession plan, the preparation of the workforce for the future, because this is something also that we have to handle, and some more specific one related to our business. So all in one, those 70-something projects for supply chain, this is how we're going to handle our transformation. This is supported by a team in supply chain. That's why supply chain is not only procurement and logistics. We have those 2 big pillars, but we have also an organization which is related to our strategy. So we have project manager, where the responsibility is to drive those projects, to support those projects. We have a big quality organization also. And we have an organization that one of its focus is about communication. And they handle the communication for global supply chain. Once more, because repeating 100 of times the same message, this is somehow the only way to be sure that we will touch the plus 1,000 people that we have in the world. And this is a very big part of the success of making that transformation, is to be sure that there will be no one left behind. And that the people understand that moving on with the future, this is not losing his job, this is taking his future in hand and be part of this transformation.
So let me ask you, you've been with the company for 1 year. What would be, if we were to take a very concrete, pragmatic project, and it might have not been finalized, because sometimes 12 months is not enough, but something that you've seen move quite a lot, or it's been fairly successful already. You're seeing also already the results. You have some lessons learned. Maybe you can give us one example so far.
I think the most interesting one is on the warehouse automation. When I joined the company, that project was existing, or was trying to exist for the past 2-3 years, and provided a certain goal of return on investments in this. And when we took that project, I think we have changed the approach, not saying that a bit of shortcut what people think when they move to automation, saying, okay, how many people I will replace because of one robot or these kind of things. And we turn the approach completely the other way around. I'll say, okay, if we move to automation of those warehouses, how much we will be able to do more with the same? And finally, if we invest right now, how long we will be able to stand without opening a new warehouse, by keeping the same number of people, or by hiring slowly of this, by improving the quality, improving the efficiency. So it was presented much more as an investment for the future. And actually, we have a project that, say, if we invest right now, if we transform one of our warehouse right now, that's going to stand for the next at least 10 years. That's the principle, that the philosophy we change here. But where I was a little bit surprised, because I think this is really related to American listed company, is that the concept was on the paper, and validating the concept was quite simple, and people were quite happy with this. The complexity of it was much more about how much will it cost, but moreover, how much will it bring back. And not only in terms of simple ROI, but what will be the impact on the P&L, what will be the impact in terms of investment or CapEx, but also directly, and this is what is interesting, and I learned a lot, and I think this was really the right way, is how much it will impact the cost per logistic line, or the cost per shipment to the final customer, and what will be the cost year after year after year. So it become a very financial exercise, where we have really pushed the supply chain into bringing commitment on the number. The concept is quite easy. You put an auto store in a warehouse, okay, you put an ERP and a WMS, and that's fine. But here, this is really, okay, if we give you that amount of money, how much it will improve our direct competitiveness at the end of the month. So a very, very, very strictly financial approach. Extremely interesting, finally. The mistake we did, most probably, is we were too ambitious at the beginning, and we were presenting the application for several warehouses at the same time. And we realized that it was a lot of money, and there is no company that can invest so much money at the same time. So where we have been a little bit more realistic, finally, we set a different roadmap and said, okay, there's going to be one warehouse, and in parallel, we're going to have a second one a few months after, and the third one a few months after. So we became a little bit reasonable, mainly driven by also the financial impact, because nobody can sign a blank check for X million and say, okay, I'm gonna play with it. So it's really a more pragmatic approach. Very big learning I had.
I mean, and I love the point that you're making, and from experience, and it seems to be a common pain point across the industry, is that there is usually or sometimes a lot of people from the supply chain realm have challenges in terms of correctly verbalizing and building these case studies. And if you want this business story of, I mean, it's not a story, but it's like concrete numbers. This is how much you're going to save. This is how much this is the ROI. That's where it breaks down, because logically it may make sense and all, but maybe most likely the business people and the C-level will not realize or will not make the connections that you as a supply chain professional make.
And this is where what you pointed, it's absolutely right. This is where finally I realized that the job of global supply chain, this is not anymore about procurement and logistics. Procurement and logistics, doing well, selecting the supplier, being able to manage the inventory, that should be a common baseline.
It's transaction.
This part finally is necessary, but this is not where you create most of the added value. So really, if you want to bring the supply chain into a value chain in creative, competitive advantage, moving simplistically saying from a cost center to a profit center somehow, it's the capability of the management team in supply chain to transform that supply chain and really to become a business owner, because this is finally what is the job of supply chain. It's managing an ecosystem made of X hundred of thousands sometimes of supplier, buying X thousand of components to bring them in a warehouse or in factory in order for people to deliver another product and to make it profitable with what we call the savings and delivering the quality and the delivery on time. So this is managing an ecosystem. And more, I would say, at that level of expectation, this is really more becoming a business owner.
So how would you... there is such a thing as optimal performance. Well, at least the equation that we were given in the question asked by one of our listeners was that optimal performance, there is a balance between people and basically talent, systems, tools, and thirdly, culture of the company. So you have this, people, tools, and the culture. How do you combine these three in an optimal way to achieve maximum results? And again, maybe keeping it concrete, because it's a little bit of a theoretical question, but maybe also from your past. It doesn't have to be now from Agilent. But what's your view on this?
I think the first thing is that you have to share a vision, and this vision has to be pragmatic, and this vision has to be able to be understood by everybody. What we are speaking, and with all the respect we must have, for a person in the warehouse that manages forklift every day, or to a person in the supply chain organization who is the head of finance, the vision must speak exactly in the same way. And when they think about what supply chain at Agilent is doing, how they transform, they should be able to have exactly the same speech. From that backbone, then you can think about how I should develop the people, because this is one of the aspects. Agilent is quite an interesting company because this is a very decentralized, a very international, but at the same time has a strong culture. We insist on the value of Agilent. And from its origin, there is a strong American influence. So this is this duality that we have to consider, being very American, at the same time international. And you look at the seniority of the people in the company, it's quite long. The people, they stay in the company for many years. When I say many, this is 20, 30, even sometimes 40 years. Because this is a good company, because the people, they love to work for that company. They share the value of it. Our job is also to help them to understand, to acquire the knowledge, and to be part of those transformations. And not just to suffer of it, or to be passive on that. But our responsibility is also to energize permanently that human structure that we have in hand by bringing new talent from outside. That could be young, inexperienced talent or people with more expertise from different culture. The difficulty is not about the competencies. That's another problem. Finding the right digital scientist or analyst today is quite difficult. But the difficulty for us is to be sure to find the people that match in terms of culture and that understand the vision and the journey we want to have with them. So most of the interview we have with the people, after screening a little bit their competency, technical competency and experience, is more a speech about what they are looking for in the next company, in the new company, how they understand our value, our culture, how they understand our transformation. I remember for the anecdote, I had very few interviews with Agilent before coming. I only had one, and a dinner. And the interview was with the CEO, my boss actually, and that was standing for only 1 hour. And he introduced the discussion, say, okay, we have checked everything that you are able to do in supply chain, in procurement, so on, so there will be no question about it, we know. And 1 hour was about people, culture, value, how I would understand the complexity for me to be the first non-Agilent and non-American person brought in that position. So this is really this match that we are looking for.
Understood.
And when you share that vision, when you are able to assemble the right people into the team, into the puzzle, permanently energized, the management of the team is finally very simple. Everybody knows his position, everybody understands his contribution, everybody share one vision. There is no discrepancy, for sure. Not everybody is always happy. This is not Disney World. We know perfectly this is the world of the company. But I found at Agilent significantly less discussion, not to say conflict or argument, in between the site and the corporate, or in between the people themselves. Because the value and this vision that we offer supersede any kind of further discussion, not to say
more siloed
and that breaks significantly the silo.
Yes,
that helped too, at least.
And since we are on the topic of people and which ultimately makes or breaks companies, and they make or break companies, let's talk a little bit about also the skills and the more technical skills, and it can also be soft skills, right? Hard skills and soft skills needed now and also needed for the future. So when you look at your team, what's the toughest to find? So this, I guess you've addressed the culture one. So right, culture fit is important and key. But then let's talk hard skills maybe. What's some of the difficult skills to get to push your supply chain team globally forward, and maybe also increasingly in the future to get?
If I look at the middle management or the individual contributor, the most difficult is to find people around digital science, digital analyst. Because when people are doing that job or that study, they don't think about coming to work for supply chain. There is an inequation in between what the people think we are, which is procuring, moving pallet in a warehouse, something like this, and really the high level of skill that they have in data management, data understanding, and so on. So this is the first difficulty.
So they want to go to Google, they don't want to come to Agilent.
Yeah. Or in the worst case, they go to bank in Singapore, but for sure they don't go to manufacturing. And that's where also we have to bring a little bit more of fashion around our brand, but also about supply chain. That's the first skill that is difficult to find. The second one is at the middle management level, so the people that manage 3-4 persons, something like that, people who understand what is transformation. Not only what is digital transformation, but really what is transformation, and to have the knowledge around it, that know the methodology, that know that transformation, this is not just moving one process or implementing one ERP, but there is a big portion of this transformation which is related to the people and to the modification of the job of the people, modification of the profile of the person, and to have this sensitiveness around how I manage the people and how I help the people to acquire new competency to handle their future. So I would say the difficult one is about people who have this competency in transformation.
Yeah. Because
this is not something that you learn in master at the university. This is usually something that you learn after, most probably. The third one, and you will see, I don't know if it's really new, this is really people who have the knowledge in terms of management. And I realize more and more in such big company that becoming a manager, it's because you are better than the people in your team, one day or the others. But there is few acquisition of knowledge and competency around management. And most of the time, people, they become manager, and then they experience life of what is a manager. I don't know if it's related specifically to Asia or to Singapore now that I'm living there for almost 8 years, but this is more and more a challenge, I believe.
And I will echo that. I mean, the best sales person is not the best sales manager. It's quite a different skill set. I mean, just taking sales as an example, it basically applies to everything: finance, manufacturing, supply chain. I think a lot of that process of just making the best at that particular job a manager doesn't usually actually yield results. So it's a different skill set altogether. That I wanted to ask specifically yourself, because you're in a position of a global head of supply chain. Very personally, right, and at a personal level, what keeps you, and I hope it's not keeping you up at night, but I'll ask you like that, what keeps you up at night in terms of what you personally feel you continuously need to learn, develop, and acquire skills, competencies, learning to stay top of your game?
Simply because if I look at my job, there is many parts in this. There is the procurement, and I believe, me personally, if I say, I'm far to be an expert in procurement, in strategy, in supplier management, and so on. And there are companies that are far better than me, or show being far better than me. That could be in the automotive, that could be in the aeronautic, and they have much more competency than I have. That for sure. So I still need to learn on that side. When I look at the logistic side of it, when I came in Agilent, I know how to work a warehouse. But when I see the complexity of the warehouse in a regulatory business with all those custom clearance complexity and so on, then I could stay 100 years in the company not having the expertise of the people that have it, definitively. When we speak about digital transformation, I saw it was 2017, if I remember, that I had this missing knowledge. So I went for 1 week in the university, in New York City University, to learn about digital transformation. And that's really opened my mind and moved my understanding from digital transformation is about knowing everything about SAP, Google, or whatsoever, but absolutely not. That the job was the transformation based on digital opportunity or digital option, and that my job would never have to be an expert in SAP if I just speak about them, but there are some people in my team that have this competency. And my job will be to aggregate the different competency around that project. So every time we enter into those digital transformation, warehouse automation, I was speaking before, I'm not an expert in warehouse automation, that for sure. But I learn by doing, by acquiring some knowledge here and there. Dematerialization of the PO, PR, and so on. Yes, that's exactly the same. So you need to keep this excitement of discovering by yourself with your team. I don't feel keep the humility of thinking that bringing better people, better experts in your team, this is your job. I will never, when I have a project, I will never be better than the 10 people around the table. That's really not my job. Job is to be sure that we aggregate the right people around the table to make that job happening. So keeping that humility, and also keeping the curiosity outside of the world, what happened in different industry. Because if I look at once more coming back on the warehouse automation, that's for sure. If I go to company like DHL, DB Schenker or else, they are 10,000 better. That doesn't mean I need to be exactly like them, but that means that there is some idea, some benchmark that I have to look after. If I go to see I don't know, Taobao or those related 10-cent company that have everything online, everything digital, I will never have the same. But there are here and there some idea that can bring added value and make the difference for my company, for Agilent, toward its competition. So this is a combination of learning through that transformation and keeping the curiosity of what happened outside.
And I want to ask you for our younger listeners, what would be a career advice, something that's been really useful for you as you've progressed and, maybe at the beginning of your career, I don't know, maybe throughout your career, and that you can share as a kind of like a mantra, right? Those, guided principles that have helped you a lot to progress along.
I believe the long life learning, definitively. I'm at a point on my side, if I can just make a very short story. When I've been graduated for the first time, then I moved to university, which was a nightmare and a disaster. I should never been a scientist, but finally I've been graduated after 3 years from the university, and then I realized that it was not for me. Then I moved to a business school, which was not most probably, I would say, the top-notch one. But then I needed it, to have a job and start to work. So I experienced different jobs. But I started my career like this, which was not super top-notch, but it was like this. And when I turned 32, I think, something like this, so 10 years after my real first graduation, I went back to school at the same time that I was working for 1.5 years. And when I turned 40, I did my MBA. And then 42, I went back for 1 week in this New York City University. And most probably before 50, I will go, which will happen quite soon. I will go again for 6 months or 1 year to school. I think we have to be conscious that what we learn at the beginning, when we are 20, evolves so fast that just expecting learning by doing from a company in a narrow environment, which is the one that the company is offering, is clearly limiting our space to acquire or extend our knowledge. And taking some breath of fresh air by getting out of the company, learning, meeting different people, different experience, that's the best thing that people should think about. So investing every 10 years on a real breakthrough, not only 2-3 days, something like this, but on the graduation, which is quite a good objective, most probably, that would be my best advice for the people who start their career.
Super. Thanks for sharing that. And funnily enough, the last guest on the podcast shared a similar. He had done. So Derek was the chief supply chain officer of Henkel. He had done PhD. He has done a master, and he's done. I think his cycles was every 5 years. So he's.
It can be even faster.
It can be, but it wasn't. I mean, depends also on the complexity, because if you actually graduate, then it can be. But he was doing like a 1 week or 2 weeks. So, but very much echoing the same principle of keep yourself learning, keep yourself excited, keep yourself always experimenting. So thanks for that, Fabrice, and thanks for all the sharing today and for all the
Thank
good case studies, and appreciate your time and great to have you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to go to www.elcotglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest updates first. If you're listening through a streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify or Stitcher, we would appreciate a kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy. And of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me. And if you have any suggestions on what to do and who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executives in supply chain or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help.